Hey guys, it's Rain here at Milo Domestic Church. I wanted to do a video for you guys today about a couple of different things I'll kind of mix into one. But basically from the title of this video, it's about supporting the dreams of your husband. Now this may sound very vague. It also might sound kind of funny because I don't know if some men would classify their interests as dreams, but just from my perspective, I kind of think about the things you long for or you're interested in or you're hoping for as a kind of a dream. So that's what I'm calling it, but you can just insert the word that you're thinking about. Also, this kind of is gonna be partly like a bit of sharing what it's like to be the wife of a student, also a wife of someone who's in the military, also a wife of someone who works for a very demanding position and job, a wife of someone who works for the church. I've been a wife of a lot of different, like my husband has done a lot of different things, and they're all kind of different types of states in life or positions that are very time consuming, that also are partly kind of a call, and so on and so forth. So I kind of wanted to take you through my walk because I think a lot of times we think of it from the perspective of the person who is pursuing the dream, but I think it's also good to talk about the person who is supporting the person who is pursuing the dream. And I don't mean supporting financially, I mean supporting them emotionally, mentally, physically, in those ways, in those aspects. Okay, so I'm gonna start at the very beginning. No, I'm gonna go back a long time ago. My husband, his first real job or career, I guess you'd say, would be the military. So he went into the military when he was 19 years old and I had just turned 19, and it was right after we were married. So we were married when I was 18, he was 19. And very young, we weren't Christian yet. And I definitely didn't have any type of servant heart or supportive mentality. If anything, I had the mentality of, you better not support your husband in any way, shape, or form, because if you do, he'll leave you when he gets older and you won't have anything except for forgotten dreams and years of misery. That's basically what I got from the world. Are those real circumstances? Do those things happen? They do happen, but they don't always happen. And honestly, those type of situations are not funny at all, and that's very sad. But when I first got married, that was my basic concept of what it meant to be supportive of your husband that I had gotten from the world. And I was not supportive. I really tried to be, and basically it was mimicking of things I had seen in like movies or things like that, because I really didn't have a concept of it other than it being a real negative thing to support your spouse, unless both of you are kind of chasing your own dreams and equally supporting each other while doing it. That was the only kind of understanding I had of supporting my husband, as long as I was being completely supported as well, the exact same way. We were both pitching in equal, complete everything. And is there anything wrong with that? No. If that's something that you're feeling called to and you guys are both supporting each other and that way specifically, that is great. Nothing is wrong with that. But in the beginning, I was not very supportive. I also had a really, really hard time with military life. We were very separated from the base. We lived really far away from it. So what my husband was experiencing and what I was experiencing was so different. I had a very hard time understanding what he was going through. And so I don't think I was really supportive or really encouraging until probably the last year, right before he got out of the military, was when, well, we both became Catholic. I had become Catholic, but I've shared before, and I want to keep saying it, but I wasn't catechized well. I didn't really stick with it. I didn't really understand what it meant to be a Christian. Once he became Catholic, we really delved into our faith, dived into our faith. And I started to read a lot about things like the virtue of humility and growing in humility. I'm just gonna say, I had a lot of pride. I had a lot of problems, a lot of problems. But I also had a lot of desire to serve. That's one big thing I think that is almost something that's lost in our culture, is when there is a child that has a servant heart, There's something about that that is really discouraged, because I think especially in a young woman, we don't want a woman to be abused, we don't want a woman to be used. And so I think when we have a daughter that has a servant heart, or we see a young woman in the culture that has a servant heart, it makes people feel very nervous, because we want to make sure she's protected and that she knows how to protect herself and make good choices and all of that. But for me, it took a long time for me to really make peace with the fact that I did have a servant's heart, and I really, really, really like to serve, and I didn't really want to be argumentative, and I didn't really want that. And so when I started to really kind of dive into that place within myself and really work on certain virtues that could help to build and strengthen that part of myself, and also just basic like understanding of relationships, all of those things, it really kind of, Christ transformed my heart in that way, and it came into a new place where I got to be very supportive of my husband's interests and his desires, and within that process find my own call and my own way of serving and following my personal desires of my heart the Lord had placed in my heart within our home. And again, whenever I make a video, I'm very cautious, because I don't really think one size fits all with a vocation and with a call and with a life, because God makes us all so different. So just because this is how God has called me specifically in my vocation and called me into ministry within my vocation, I don't assume or expect anyone else to be exactly like me, or saying that everyone should be like me. We're all different, and I think there are probably a lot of people that do it way better than I do, but I just wanted to share this because I think this is something that's very special, and I wanted to make sure to talk about it because this is a huge part of my vocation, my walk, and my personal call to ministry within our home, to support my husband and to encourage him in any way I can. So back to kind of my story, the last year of military life was really different for me, because for the first time I didn't constantly think about what I was getting out of everything. Was everything fair? When I stopped thinking that way and I started thinking about my husband and I as a vocation, that we were serving each other and we were being called to something higher, and God had kind of plans for our lives. And I started to really think about what my husband was desiring in life, not just for his own sake, but how to serve the Lord. Because when my husband went through his conversion, he went through a conversion. I mean, it was like he was wanting to serve the Lord in any way, shape or form. And I was like really wanting to kind of stand by him and do anything I could to help that call. And so when he got out of the military, he ended up going to Franciscan University, and he was working towards a bachelor's in theology and then a master's in theology with a specialization in catechetics. During that time, we had 3 children. We didn't have a lot of money, and we rented a little place there, and we lived on a military stipend. And he did what he could on the side to make some money that we needed, and odd and end, what I call odd and end jobs, here and there kind of stuff. And he got really handy around the house to fix cars and fix stuff around the house, so we didn't have to be putting money out. And it was during that time, I think, where we really grew together, because one thing we had to, we really needed each other in that time. And I saw that there were just times where he would be sitting up very late at night studying the word, studying church teaching, studying what he needed, because he took this very seriously. And when he was going to go out, one day into the world, he wanted to be prepared and ready. And with that comes late nights. And it was during that time where I learned to do most things with the kids and most things around the house. Our house in Steubenville was like a tornado disaster zone almost all the time. It's almost hilarious because when I look at pictures of it, I mean, you think this is messy? It was crazy, because I was just trying to survive and do what I could to raise our babies and to make sure that we had meals. And I had no, like, I didn't know how to run a home. I barely knew how to cook. But I learned during that time. I would get together with my Titus 2 women. I would get together with older women. I would ask questions. We had a group of older women and younger women that would get together and talk and find out, like, you know, how to do this and how to do that, and how to encourage our husbands instead of, you know, tearing them down with our words, how to support our community from our own home without necessarily going out and getting involved in a lot of things. Not that there's anything wrong if someone does that, but it was just a time of massive growth for me. I remember going to see our doctor there because he was just like an amazing Catholic doctor. And every time I would go, I would ask him like a billion questions because I knew he had really good answers. And I wanted to have whatever kind of knowledge I could to take care of my babies the best way I could at home. Like he knew about herbal remedies and homeopathic remedies. So I just spent those almost 4 years like reading as much as I could, observing women that were trying to live holy lives, taking care of our children as best I could, doing a lot of the work, figuring out how to make meals, how to cook, how to bake pies for the first time. I finished my first quilt there in that time. Those were the years of just basically asking the Lord to pour his grace all over me, heal me, and prepare me for what he was calling my husband and I to do. And it was really hard because I also had a really serious thyroid condition and I did not know it. So the first couple of years were really challenging. And then I found out I had the thyroid condition, and that helped a lot when I got on medication for it and started taking care of myself in certain ways. But anyway, so we kind of went from military life, not knowing the Lord, having big conversions, transitioning from military life to like full-time student life for my husband, and then for me being a student wife and being supportive, and also having children and figuring out how to have children, what it meant to be, devout Catholic people raising children for the Lord and for their own good, and all the while trying to learn what it meant to live in this vocation of marriage. So those 4 years will always be so special to me. Were they easy and perfect? No, they were really, really hard. And we had our own stuff that we were working through too in marriage. When you're working on things and you're trying to figure out how to love each other the way that you need to be loved, but also how to kind of bend and not just expect what you're wanting or what you think you're needing. And it was during that time I also realized one big thing that I think is really important in this. When I was growing up in a lot of movies and in school and stuff like that, I remember hearing this kind of concept about women losing themselves by giving. And I was terrified of this idea of losing myself. Like I would, and then I remember during that time realizing that although I had lost, quote unquote, so much of what I thought it meant to be myself, I was still there. I was still here. Like I didn't disappear. I didn't go away. I still was me, but I was developing and I was growing in new ways, in ways that I didn't really know that I could grow and still be me. And it was a time of really recognizing the fact that it was really okay. I became really okay with letting go and losing myself to be able, it's kind of like what the scriptures talk about. Matthew 10:39, and it talks about how when you lose yourself for the sake of the Lord, you'll find yourself. And I think that was the biggest key that I was missing, the biggest piece I was missing in all of that. The whole thing about really being terrified of losing yourself was that if you lose yourself for the world, or you lose yourself for a person, or you lose yourself for an idea, then yeah, it can be really kind of devastating, you feel, because you feel like you really lost yourself. But I really found that when I really lost myself for the sake of the Lord, and I kept working closer and just trying to move closer to him constantly, and during that process, sometimes there was sleep deprivation, sometimes there was, and you do it for your children, you do, but you really do it for his sake. And when I say that, I'm real cautious because I don't like the idea of the only reason I would do something is because I see Jesus in a person. That is phenomenal, seeing Jesus in a person. But there's also something really amazing about the human being standing right in front of you. They have value and they have infinite importance. And so, importance. During that time, just recognizing the fact that the people in front of me, I was serving them for their sake. And then ultimately, I was serving them and working for the Lord's sake. And during that process, I really did lose a lot of quote unquote myself, but I gained so much inside of myself that I didn't even know I was capable of. I didn't know I could love that much. I didn't know I could serve that much. I didn't know I could do so much and still be me and still serve those around me. So I know it seemed like a little bit of a talking off point there, but I think that's an important part of being supportive of your husband's dreams, because that was something that was really hard for me at the beginning, was the idea that I would lose myself somehow by serving this other person and helping them. And then when I recognized the fact that that wasn't the case, it was like kind of a powerful thing. It was wonderful. So anyway, so during that time, being the student wife, my husband, he graduated with a bachelor's in theology and he got his master's in theology and catechetics. There are a lot of practical things I could talk about of how I supported him during that time. I did all nighttime stuff with the kids. I put them to bed. I made all meals. I made sure that when he came home, I tried my best to make sure that he came home to a comfortable environment. Y'all, the house was so messy. But during that time, he talks about how he really, he loves to have things like clean and ordered. It's just kind of really good for him. It helps him to thrive. And so he'll try to order what he can and kind of clean when he can. But he talks about how he learned during that time that he couldn't expect that of me necessarily, because I was doing so much already and he was doing so much. And so some things just kind of had to go to the wayside during that time. Also, I didn't really have good cleaning habits back then, or organizing or meal planning or all the things that I do now that would have been so helpful. But anyway, so from military wife, shared a bit about that, and then supporting during being a student wife and taking on the majority of responsibilities with the children, and also really taking it seriously about faith formation. I really surrounded them. We used to go to Franciscan University because there wasn't a lot to do in that town, but I used to get them out of the house. We'd go to Franciscan University. We'd spend time before the Blessed Sacrament. When they were so little, we had 3 little ones, a baby, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and the 4-year-old and 2-year-old would kind of climb up on the little kneelers before the Eucharist. And I don't know if they were really praying or pretending to pray, but we would do that. We would go walk around campus and see, the priests and the religious sisters, and they would see them and they'd smile. And I remember one time my little guy had this collection of rocks in his pocket, and they were just the most amazing thing he'd ever had. And I remember there was a priest giving confession outside, and my son thought it was a fantastic idea to bring the priest all these rocks. And he moved so quickly that I was like, oh, and then the priest was so sweet and just stopped confession, and he just, acted like each rock was the most precious gift. And it was just really sweet. And so during that time, I really made sure to bring the children on campus to see where their papa was and how important what he was doing was, and letting them see, the religious life, and getting together with families that were also just, these women that I got to meet were so beautiful, and they were so supportive of their husbands, but they were still so strong in who they were. And it was just a beautiful time. So I found ways to really support my husband's, his work as a student, and also bring our children into that. And in return too, my husband really made an effort to try to bring us to things as much as we could. I remember the early years, sometimes I get kind of frustrated because I was like, I'm exhausted, I don't want to go to all these things. But when I started to realize what he was doing was he didn't want to just have his own, this is just what I'm doing. He was pulling us, into his life and incorporating us right where he was at. And that was something that happened too once we went into his first position working for a church. This was a really new experience because after being a student wife, I was so used to that now when he went to his first position at a parish, I was like, oh, and it's funny because as a Catholic, like some people say pastors' wives, well, when your husband is a director of religious education or a director of faith formation or evangelization, you're a wife of someone who does so much that seems kind of, pastoral and so many things in the church, but he's not a pastor. So you're like, well, I'm not a pastor's wife, but it's like very similar to kind of what, not all of it, but what kind of a pastor does, like within sometimes like other churches. I'm not sure what other ones, but and so we would go to a lot of events together and bring our families. And he really tried to incorporate us. Like he would be working and doing something, he would have us come with him. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I have to keep the kids busy and this is so hard. But then I started to realize that that's what he was doing, is he was bringing us to his work as well, because he didn't want to just be at work when he had to be all the time. He also wanted to make sure that we were seeing what he was doing, that he was present in the kids' lives, and that I could be involved as well. And it was I think it was 2 years we were at the first one. So anyway, so it just became where, and during this time, y'all, I'm gonna be honest, I was still struggling with a lot of stuff that I kind of brought from the culture. I still felt like this small sometimes because I didn't have a career, or because whenever I would go to the doctor's office and it would say, what do you do for work? And there was nothing to check, so I had to put unemployed. Like, there were things like that were difficult, because I don't know if that's so much pride. I think that was just more of like, where is my place in society? Like, what is my place in the society? So I still struggled with that because I didn't quite know how to categorize myself. And it wasn't until I really stepped back from that mindset of I must like find a category within society, and started to get to a place where I said, where is my category? Where is my place within the Lord? And what is my work that he's having me do? That things really changed, really more like mentally or like emotionally for myself, because finally I could find a place where I belonged and I understood, who I was. And that was really pivotal for me as well. So it's funny because as I'm sharing this video, I feel like I'm talking a lot about myself, but I think that's really important, that when you're thinking about supporting your husband, we put so much effort on like how we're going to support him, but that puts a lot of effort also on him, because then it's about, well, I'm doing all of this for you, and you can build it up where you can get really frustrated because what are you doing for me? Instead of really working on like how I really worked a lot like on my internal world inside of myself, of what I needed to work on so I could do this work in front of me well, so I could love my children with a smile, so I could speak well of my husband in front of my children, so I could mean what I'm saying to them and not just saying it because, oh, I should say it, but really mean it. So I could look at my husband and find such value in what he does, but in value of who he is. And like, it would have been really hard for me to do any of those things if I just focused on the fact that I'm supporting him. I'm just supporting him. Instead of saying like, where is my place in this vocation? And what can I do to better, my level of virtue by God's grace, but also through habit and work and education, so I can become, more comfortable within the setting and the world that I'm at. One woman once told me, and it was this huge turning point for me, this is when we were in Steubenville, and she talked about ministry within the home, and she talked about how our home is our ministry. This was so many years ago. I remember that blowing my mind, and I know I've shared that on this channel before, and hence the name, My Little Domestic Church. I held on to that when she said that, and it just made my heart so happy, because there is always a way. There is always a way to have a ministry. If you feel the Lord is calling you to a ministry, but you also feel that he wants you to be in the home, and you're like, how am I going to do that? Your home is your ministry. There is something so beautiful about when you walk into a home, and I did a collab about homemaking, and one of the women talked about like just feeling so much love from being in a home that's functional and clean and smells lovely. And when you come, you feel so loved and encouraged. Like I have a hospitality section within my kitchen. And when people come, I really want them to feel comforted, and I want them to feel cared for, because I really care about them. I want that for them, not just because I want them to come to my home and they can feel so great because I'm so great, but what can I do for this person? How can I serve someone who steps into this home or who lives in this home? So like, these are just important parts, I think, to think about when we're really setting off and wanting to really support our husbands. Let's say your husband comes home and he has this new idea. I don't know what it would be, but let's say he wants to start a business. Instead of just quickly being like, oh my goodness, my husband has no business skills, he's never done this before. Before you get to that place, sometimes I think it's really good to stop and think like, oh, like you want to know what's in his heart. Like, where is he coming from? What is he desiring? I never feel very comfortable giving advice necessarily, or acting like I know what's what, because in the end, y'all, I'm just, I'm just a woman trying to like serve the Lord as best I can and share that with anyone who might want to listen. But I do think it's really important to really stop and think about her husband's heart, and also like how a man's heart is, you know, and what he's really calling out for his wife to hear and to understand where he is and what he's wanting in life. And support is so important to anybody, but I think it's really, really important to a husband. And again, you're probably like, well, it's really important to me as a woman. And I think it probably is too. My idea of support from my husband is so different. And also I've really learned to let go of a lot of things that I thought I needed to function. I remember in the early years, I thought I needed major appreciation and tons of encouragement, because it is part of my love language. Like affirming words is huge for me. But I had to teach myself over time to let that go at certain points in our walk, because I wasn't going to be receiving that probably as much as I would want, but I needed to be okay regardless of that, because there were still good things for me to get done. There were still wonderful things like work, so much that it's starting to get warm in here, so my cheeks are starting to turn red. But there's just so much that I had in front of me. I had a family. There were so many things to be thankful for. And I don't want to get into like, oh, we got to think positively, because sometimes that can be like totally depressing when we think that way. And sometimes that can be really helpful. But I think thinking about like the fact that there's so much joy and there's so much goodness. And one last point I want to talk about in this is I think that it's really important, at least for me, it became important to remember that marriage is like, it's just like this, I mean, by God's grace, it's this long experience. It's not, I used to think of marriage as like right now, like right how I feel right now, or how I felt 5 years ago, or how I'm gonna feel. But instead of thinking it as like, it's like all of these small moments that add up, and all the virtue that we build, and all the things that we grow and we work. And I mean, goodness, like now, my husband and I have been married, we were married civilly in 2004, so that's 15 years, and then we were married in the church 13 years ago. And I know him so much better than I ever thought I knew him at the beginning. I know myself so much better. And I don't think that's just necessarily maturity or time, because you could be married for 15 years and still feel in some ways, I mean, I could still, if I hadn't grown the ways that I did, I could still be pretty immature, and I could still be pretty self-involved, and we could be married for 15 years. I mean, I just know that about myself. If I hadn't really like turned to the Lord and really wanted to walk toward him through this process and within our vocation, I could totally see myself, if we even would have made it for this long. And again, whatever I say about on my video, I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about other people. I'm not trying to judge anybody and their own situations. I'm just talking about myself and my work in supporting my husband and his dreams and following the Lord's calling within that. So anyway, so I just wanted to talk about that. It would have just been really hard for me to continue within this vocation and really come to a place of serving the Lord while loving my husband and loving my children, and seeing that he's calling me to love them, seeing the ministry that he's calling me within my home and this good work. So I just wanted to make this video. I know it's very kind of chatty. I just wanted to make this video though, talking about the idea of supporting our husbands and how it's so much more than like a concept or about saying, you know, that I'm supporting him, making it all about him, because that's a huge weight on his shoulders too. And about really working on our hearts and what it is that we feel God's calling us to throughout this work, this good work of supporting our husbands. So anyway, I probably could have done a lot better with bullet points and making this a bit more, but I just felt like this was kind of one of those heart videos to share my heart with you guys. And so yeah, so I hope y'all enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments. Please keep them kind, if you could. But also let me know in the comments if there are things that you would like me to expound upon this, or about how you guys, how you ladies have supported your spouses and how you have found that there are ways to really build within yourself the virtue the Lord is calling you. I just love when you guys share stuff in the comments. You guys have like the best. I have like the best subscribers. I just like love you guys, and I love all the things that you share and what you ask and the back and forth between us. But anyway, and if you're new here, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community and give it a thumbs up. And I just hope you guys all have a blessed and wonderful day. God bless.